Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said she was just not in the mood, the same way people comment offhand about the weather. Flat, distracted, eyes still on her iPhone, thumb hovering over the Starbucks app like she was more concerned about ordering tomorrow's latte than acknowledging the man sitting 10 feet from her. I remember standing there in the kitchen, staring at the Costco bag she dropped on the counter to look homey, like bulk groceries could hide the distance that had been growing between us for months. And when I told her she shouldn't expect me to stay in a marriage where I didn't matter, she didn't even lift her head. She blinked once, slow, irritated, like I'd interrupted whatever corporate ladder she was climbing in her head. That blink told me everything. It wasn't about mood. It wasn't about us. It was about someone else. Someone she respected more than me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. I packed. Just the essentials. Work boots. A couple shirts. My tools. Left the key on the table beside one of those Bath and Body Works candles she always lit to make the house smell warmer than she ever acted. And the moment it hit the wood, I felt something shift inside me, like a door closing without a sound. Her voice followed me down the hall, calling my name, but soft, distracted, like she wasn't sure if she needed me or just didn't want to deal with questions. I didn't turn back. I walked into the night, down the driveway, toward my Dodge Ram waiting under the street lamp. After that, it was just the truck, the road, and a silence so clean it felt like oxygen. When I pulled away, I didn't look at the house. I didn't need to. The truth was already behind me. And somewhere between the porch light fading in the mirror and the first mile of highway, I understood the thing she never said out loud. She'd been comparing me to him for a long time. Her boss, the man who held her promotions in his hand, the one she laughed differently with, the one she came home guarded about. I didn't disappear. I simply stopped standing where I wasn't wanted. I didn't plan to hear anything about her so soon. I thought disappearing would buy me distance, maybe even a little numbness. But the world has a way of pushing truth straight into your hands when you stop chasing it. 2 days after I left, I was on a job site, cutting lumber, trying to let the rhythm drown out the questions I refused to ask. That's when Mark, one of the electricians, walked over with that hesitant look people get when they're not sure if they should say what they know. He mentioned he'd seen my wife and her department director together at a corporate dinner earlier that week. Said the guy looked comfortable, like he already owned the room and everything in it, including her. He said it without judgment, but the words landed like a nail driven too deep, clean and final. I didn't react. I kept cutting, but something in me pulled inward, colder, tighter. It wasn't surprise. It was confirmation. I spent that evening in a cheap motel, the kind with a humming ice machine and thin walls. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't want noise. But eventually I opened my phone, not to call her, not to check messages. Those were off, disconnected, but to scroll through my own memories of how the distance began. The late nights she'd blame on end-of-quarter deadlines. The way she carried her work badge like a fragile piece of identity. The careful tone she used whenever she mentioned him. The one that sounded like respect covered with ambition. I remembered how she'd sit beside me on the couch in silence. The two of us technically together, but living separate evenings. She'd stream something on Hulu while pretending not to notice I was watching her more than the screen. And every time her phone buzzed, she'd angle it away, casual but precise. None of it hit me like heartbreak. More like clarity settling into place, cold and unshakable. I didn't text her. I didn't explain my absence. I didn't tell her what I'd heard. I just let the silence expand, because for the first time, I understood the power of not reacting. The truth was already moving toward me on its own. I only had to stay still long enough to see it clearly. The proof didn't come from some dramatic reveal. It came quietly, the way most truths do when you finally stop trying to protect yourself from them. I was sitting in the cab of the truck outside a supply store, letting the engine idle while I waited for a delivery confirmation. The sun was hitting the windshield at an angle that made everything look sharper, like the world had decided I didn't deserve soft edges anymore. That's when my buddy Aaron sent me a message. Not a warning, not gossip, just a quick note saying he hoped I was okay, and that he'd seen something I deserved to know. I didn't respond. I just opened the attached screenshot of her office calendar that someone on the inside must have leaked without realizing what it implied. There it was. A string of late-night project reviews with her director lined up like a pattern she thought no one would connect. Same room, same time, repeated, efficient, corporate. And suddenly, every tired smile she gave me when she got home made sense. Every night, she sat beside me pretending to watch Hulu while answering messages she claimed were from her team. Every time she brushed off my questions with that controlled tone those office people use when they think they're negotiating instead of lying. I didn't rage. I didn't even curse. I just stared at the calendar, letting the pieces fall into a picture that had been there for months. It wasn't passion. It wasn't some whirlwind romance she'd stumbled into. It was strategy, career, positioning. She'd chosen someone who could give her leverage, the same way she bought bulk groceries at Costco to make herself look grounded at home. It was all branding, a curated version of her life she maintained for everyone but me. I closed the screenshot and set the phone face down beside me. My expression must have changed, because even the air inside the truck felt different, colder, more exact. She didn't see it happen. She wasn't there to notice the shift. But that was the moment I stopped being the man waiting for her explanations and became the man stepping out of her story without announcing it. The evidence wasn't what broke me. It was how quietly it all fit together. I didn't plan my disappearance. It happened the same way a structure gives way after too many unnoticed stresses, quietly, then all at once. The morning after I saw that calendar, I woke before sunrise in the motel, staring at the ceiling like it might offer a reason to stay in the life I'd just stepped out of. There was none. I sat up, laced my boots, and felt a strange steadiness settle into my hands, the kind you get when you finally stop arguing with reality. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't even glance at the notifications piling up on the lock screen. I powered the phone off and put it in the glove box like a piece of equipment that had outlived its use. I drove for hours, no destination in mind, only distance. The sky turned from gray to pale orange, stretching over the highway like a clean slate I hadn't asked for but was willing to take. At some point I pulled into a small roadside diner, not the kind she'd ever choose, the opposite of the places where she'd sip Starbucks while pretending to listen. Inside, the quiet felt honest. People minding their own business. No performance. No ambition disguised as kindness. Just the low hum of conversations that didn't need to be important. I ate quickly, paid in cash, and walked back out to the truck without leaving a trace of where I was headed next. When I got back on the road, I turned the phone on only long enough to check the bank. Hers lit up with charges tied to dinners she once described as team celebrations. The pattern was obvious now. I thought about the Bath & Body Works candle still burning in our kitchen, how its warm smell tried to hide the cold space we'd grown into. She'd probably assume I was blowing off steam, driving around until I cooled down. She didn't understand me well enough to know I wasn't coming back to clarify anything. By midday, I crossed 2 county lines and kept going. No calls, no credit card trail, no explanations. I didn't need to craft an exit. I just removed myself. The silence I left behind would speak louder than anything I could say. I didn't go looking for leverage. It found me the same way everything else had since I walked out. Quiet, steady, unavoidable. I was 3 towns over, staying in a small rental above a garage that smelled like motor oil and old lumber. The kind of place no one would think to look for a man like me. I kept to myself, worked odd jobs for cash, and let the silence settle around me like a second skin. One evening, while sorting through some tools, I got a message from Aaron again. He still didn't know I'd shut my life off, but he'd heard things on a job site from a guy whose wife worked in the same building as my wife. Office people talk. They trade information the way construction crews trade tools, casually, easily, without thinking about where it might end up. He mentioned her director, the man she'd aligned herself with. Apparently, he had a reputation for pushing expenses that weren't entirely clean, client dinners coded as team building, travel labeled as urgent oversight, small manipulations no one questioned because of his position. It wasn't scandalous on the surface, just the kind of corporate bending that gets ignored until someone decides it shouldn't be. I didn't respond, but I reread the message twice. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, just to see the shape of the truth forming around a man who had stepped into my life without ever meeting me. A day later, when I stopped by a quiet breakfast spot far from town, I overheard two people at the counter talking about a promotion freeze in her department. Something about budget audits. Something about leadership review. It was the first time I felt the world shifting without me touching anything. I didn't need to hack files or dig through her things. I didn't need to expose anyone. All it took was connecting what I'd heard to the right anonymous tip line. Public information. Documented facts. Nothing more. I drove back to the rental afterward, past a Waffle House glowing in the dark, and realized I wasn't angry. I was detached. Unreachable. Whatever happened next wouldn't be because of me swinging at anyone. It would be because I finally stepped out of the way and let the truth fall where it always should have. The fallout didn't hit her all at once. It drifted in like a cold front, slow at first, then sharp enough to cut through the image she'd worked so hard to polish. I wasn't there to see any of it directly, but people talk, and silence makes every whisper clearer. A week after I'd sent that anonymous note, I heard from a former coworker of hers who didn't even know we were separated. She mentioned there'd been a shift in the department. A review meeting no one was warned about. Doors closed. Voices lowered. Her director walking out with that stiff posture people get when they're pretending nothing's wrong. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was administrative. Controlled. The exact kind of collapse that happens when someone higher up decides to look closely at numbers that were never meant to be questioned. I imagined her standing there in the break room, holding one of those Costco-sized snack tubs she always kept at her desk, pretending everything was normal while the ground quietly tilted under her feet. She had built her whole identity around being composed, organized, above the chaos. But status is fragile. It doesn't take fire to burn it down, just a pause in the wrong place. A look she can't interpret. A question asked at the wrong time. And suddenly everyone around her sees what she's been hiding. That she isn't untouchable after all. A couple of days later, I heard from my sister, who still lived near our old neighborhood. She mentioned, almost casually, that my wife had shown up at a family gathering she wasn't invited to, asking if anyone had heard from me. Not desperate, not panicked. Yet, but unsteady in a way she couldn't mask. My sister said she tried to hold herself together, but people noticed the crack forming. Someone even asked her if everything was all right, and she gave that polished smile she used at corporate events, the one that didn't reach her eyes. I was miles away by then, eating a late dinner at the Waffle House off the highway, sitting alone in a booth with the truck parked outside. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt distance. Clean, cold distance. Whatever was happening to her wasn't mine to fix or soften. I wasn't her shield anymore, and for the first time, everyone around her could see it. Isolation doesn't always come from being alone. Sometimes it comes from realizing the people you counted on were only there as long as you held everything together for them. From what I heard, that was the phase she'd stepped into. Her friends, the ones who used to admire her composure and ambition, started keeping their distance once the review in her department became common knowledge. No one said anything directly. Office people rarely do, but she could feel it in the way conversations quieted when she walked into a room, in the polite smiles that didn't linger, in the sudden busy weekends, whenever she tried to make plans. Respect slips quietly when it was shallow to begin with. She tried reaching out to my sister again, this time sounding softer, almost hesitant, asking if she knew where I was staying. My sister said she kept her answer short. Not cruel, just distant. People sensed something in my wife they hadn't noticed before, a tension under the surface, like someone bracing for a storm she pretended wasn't coming. And without me beside her, she didn't have the calm center she used to lean on, the balance she never admitted I provided. Someone else told me she'd stopped going to her usual Starbucks before work, not because she didn't want the drink, but because she couldn't stand sitting alone in a place where she used to feel important. It's strange how small routines become heavy when pride gets bruised. Even her apartment felt different from what little I heard. Too quiet, too still, like the Bath and Body Works scents she lit couldn't cover what was missing. Meanwhile, I stayed 3 towns over, keeping my life simple. I worked during the day, kept my phone off most nights, and ate at the Waffle House near the highway when I needed a place that didn't demand anything from me. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't watching her fall. I was just absent. Not angry. Not hopeful. Just out of reach. There were moments I wondered if she finally understood the weight of the silence I left behind. Not the punishment of it, just the clarity. For the first time in our marriage, she had to sit with the space I used to fill, and no one was stepping in to replace it. When she finally found me, it wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, just the sound of footsteps on gravel outside the garage apartment where I'd been staying. I knew it was her before she even knocked. There's a certain hesitation people carry when they're not sure if they're welcome, and hers came through the door like a draft. I opened it because ignoring her wasn't the point. I wasn't hiding. I just wasn't offering myself up anymore. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just in the way people shrink when they've lost the audience they relied on. Her eyes moved past me into the room, taking in the stripped-down life I'd built. A bed, a workbench, my boots by the door. No comfort, no illusion. Nothing curated like the apartment. She tried to dress up with those Bath and Body Works candles. She stood there waiting for me to ask why she came, but I didn't. I let the silence do its work. She finally said she needed to understand what happened, her voice quiet, almost steady, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. She didn't mention the director. She didn't mention the investigation. She didn't mention the department whispers that had started circling her like vultures. She just said she felt like she'd lost her footing and didn't know how to get it back. Hearing it out loud didn't move me. It just confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't here because of me. She was here because the world she chose over us had stopped holding her up. I stepped aside so she could enter, but I didn't offer a seat. I didn't soften anything. She stood in the center of the room, looking around like she expected to find some version of the man she used to lean on. Instead, she found the distance I'd grown into. I answered her questions with short, plain words, nothing more. I didn't fill the gaps. I didn't cushion the truth. She asked why I left without a fight, and I told her she already knew. Her face tightened, not in anger but in recognition. Outside, the evening settled in, the sky dimming toward that quiet blue that always made the truck look darker. She looked at the door like she wasn't ready to leave, but I didn't offer anything to keep her there. I wasn't in the game anymore, and for the first time, she saw it. Her collapse didn't look like a single moment. It looked like a series of small, sharp realizations hitting her one after another, each one cutting a little deeper than the last. I didn't witness it directly, but when she showed up again a week after our first conversation, the change in her was impossible to miss. She stood outside the garage apartment like someone who'd walked through a storm without a coat. Her hair pulled back without care, no makeup, no practiced poise. Even the way she held herself looked different, less anchored, less certain. She didn't step inside right away. She asked if I had a minute, and I gave a slow nod because I wasn't interested in punishing her, only in seeing the truth settle. She looked past me at the quiet room, then down at her own hands, like she wasn't sure where to start. She said her director had been asked to step back, that the review had revealed inconsistencies, and people in the office were suddenly looking at her like she'd known something all along. She said it in a controlled voice, but her eyes betrayed her. The fall from a pedestal is silent, but it echoes inside the person who built it. She mentioned she hadn't been sleeping, that the apartment felt too big, too hollow. She tried filling it with those same Bath and Body Works candles, but the smell only made the emptiness feel heavier. She admitted she couldn't concentrate at work. She'd sit at her desk with a Starbucks cup cooling untouched beside her, staring at emails that didn't mean anything anymore. Even Hulu nights, her old escape, felt pointless without someone next to her, someone whose presence she'd taken for granted until it vanished. I listened without interrupting, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because every word she spoke revealed another piece of the life she'd chosen over ours cracking in her hands. She said she kept replaying moments she once dismissed as small, me fixing things without being asked, me waiting up when she worked late, me grounding her when she spiraled about deadlines. She said she didn't realize how much of her stability came from me until the structure collapsed. I didn't comfort her. I didn't step forward. I stood still, letting her see exactly what her world looked like without me holding any of it up. She came one last time on a gray morning, the kind where the sky hangs low and everything feels heavier than it should. I heard her before I saw her, slow steps on the gravel, the kind people take when they're not sure how the moment will end. I opened the door because running from the conversation wasn't my way, but the man she used to know wasn't standing there anymore. She saw it right away. She looked worn down, but not from crying. More like someone who'd been holding herself together for too long with the wrong kind of glue. She said she didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't even expect an answer. She just needed to speak while she still had the courage. Her voice shook only once, when she said the life she'd chased had turned into a mirror she didn't want to look at anymore. Her director was out. Her team avoided her. Even the morning routine she once loved, grabbing Starbucks, walking into the office with purpose, felt hollow now. She admitted she'd been watching shows alone on Hulu just to fill the quiet, but the silence always seeped back in. She said the apartment didn't feel like home, no matter how many Bath and Body Works candles she lit. I didn't interrupt. I stood there, letting her feel the full weight of the distance between who we were and who we'd become. When she finally went still, she asked the only real question left. Not if we could go back. Not if I still loved her. She asked whether there was anything left worth rebuilding. I stepped outside, letting the door fall shut behind me. We stood facing each other beside the truck, the morning air sharp and cold. I told her I hadn't disappeared. I just stopped showing up in places where I wasn't respected. Her eyes lowered, not in shame, but in understanding. Real, quiet, overdue understanding. I didn't reach for her. I didn't walk away either. I told her if there was a future, it wouldn't be built the way we built the first one. No more carrying her ambitions on my back. No more silent compromises. If she wanted something new, it had to stand on equal ground. She nodded once, steady. For the first time, she didn't try to control the silence. She let it sit between us, honest and bare. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to leave. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.